Hi, and welcome to Koru News Round. Back from the world tour, back in my shed in the northeast of England, amongst the snow, feeling the cold, and having had a rather exciting school run this morning. Welcome back to Kaylee Leisure. Nice to see you again. How is it in Brno this morning?
Good. In the Czech Republic, yep. Things are also pretty cold. I cycled my way through the snow this morning. It's not settling. It's not laying yet, but it's definitely falling from the sky. And we've got a week of snowy weather forecasts. So we're looking to cozy on up with a good book over the weekend.
Excellent. Well, listen, first of all, a little bit of a thank you for prepping some of the articles whilst I was on my travels for this. Really excited to be talking with you this morning. So let's share the screen and we will make a start.
Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with school readiness, this popped up and it's in the Times Ed. And it's this idea about what school readiness is for early years kids. Just give us a little bit of a perspective on this article, Kaylee.
So I found this article. I found it very interesting. I also need to preface this with the fact that although I am primary ed trained, I am not an early years specialist. So I did have to go off and do quite a bit of background reading and I got a bit nerdy about this one, and I did look at a lot of the data and the reports and everything behind it.
That's why we have you working with Koru, Kaylee.
No, it was really interesting to me, and so this article kind of goes through why they're not sure that the readiness targets are kind of working. The government have said that they want to get 75% of children to be school ready by 2028.
What do they mean by school ready, and what's your perspective on this? Is that a sort of healthy measure?
See, this is a really interesting question. So school readiness is linked to like the early years goals, right? Which are part of the early years curriculum. And so they're quite broad stroke general goals around lots of different areas, communication and language, personal, social, emotional development, physical development, literacy, all of these things. And, some of them are quite broad, like negotiating space and obstacles safely. Others are quite specific. Some of the numeracy ones are very specific. Some of the literacy ones as well. Being able to hold a pencil effectively in terms of your fine motor skills. So they're often quite broad strokes. Some of them are very specific, and they've been influenced by a whole body of research. The biggest longitudinal study of primary and early years through primary and now secondary education. So it is research backed, and the data shows us that since they started collecting, bearing in mind we've got a couple of years out for COVID, and we also had a curriculum kind of review in 2021, so you can't compare eggs with eggs. Generally, we've been improving, or we've seen school readiness as the number of kids who are achieving a good standard against these quite broad strokes or very specific educational goals, we've seen it improve.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have an issue with the goals themselves, in terms of kids being able to hold pencils, etc. I think they're admirable things. My issue, my question here is this sort of the standardization that they're supposed to meet these by a particular point, and you and I are well enough read and experienced enough to be able to say and recognize that sort of cognitive development doesn't happen in a uniform fashion, and the idea that they've all got to meet that point before they're able to be into school, etc. It's something that I philosophically I find problematic. If a teacher's job is not to meet kids where they are and help them develop from that point, if that's not their job, then it starts to beg questions about what a teacher's role is. Is it just delivering content to kids, and you need them at a particular point before you can start delivering that kind of content or that curriculum to them? It's almost like saying, well, you've got to be fit and healthy before you come to the doctors.
Yes, I think I understand where you're coming from with the wording around that idea of school readiness. And the ultimate thing is, kids are going to end up going through to year one and reception and whatever, not being quote unquote school ready. And I think that's what Lydia Hodges says in this article is that it doesn't leave any room to look at the nuance of progress, right? And I think that's what we're kind of saying. Like, yes, we know we want a goal, we want things that we're aiming for, and when you put a hard line of 75%, then you start making that more than a goal and something that we have to reach. It's not just it would be nice if. And that then starts to put pressure on teachers, leaders,
and parents and kids, and it brings shame. It brings shame because it says that you're not ready to come to school if this is the situation. And we all know that shame as a prohibitive emotion can be helpful, but in terms of a developmental emotion is just totally and utterly toxic.
Exactly. The fact that right now, I mean, the latest figures for 23-24 were 67.7% of children. So we're not, they're not talking about making great gains here. We're not talking about, doubling the number of kids that are school ready, but just by putting that headline, squeezing that pressure, I'm not sure whether that's a helpful way to think about it.
I'm pretty sure it's not a helpful way to think about it.
There we go.
I just kind of think that a teacher's job is to meet kids where they are, and irrespective of whether the parents have fallen short, found it difficult, not had the whatever reason that kid has not reached that level, then it's for the teachers, the experts, the experts within their field, to make that work with the kids that present to them, in the same way that a doctor has to deal with someone, whether they're fat, thin, old, clever, not so clever, whatever it is, they've got to deal with that in front of them because that's their professional role.
For sure. And I think it's a lovely analogy that we use all the time, is that you can plant several bulbs in the ground at the same time, but they don't all bloom at the same time. And we think about kids in a classroom, they're not planted at the same time. There is a year's worth of difference in that, and between the oldest and the youngest. So we just need to be mindful. We want to have the best intentions for our kids going into school, because we know that if you do tick those boxes of school readiness, or you have a good provider who is leading you towards that, it does make differences further on up the schooling. However, we should be looking at the provision, the education of the teachers, the professionalism, the relationship between students and teachers, because actually that is a huge factor. Even mentioned in these reports, much more than we should be thinking about. Can my child identify the numbers 1 to 5 objects by looking at them, not counting? Is that something they have to be able to do?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you were familiar with the school readiness test that we had when we both worked in Italy. There was one simple, very binary test that we had.
Was it to do with parents and wallets?
Well, I suppose that was probably the first test. It was actually to do with nappies. As long as the child wasn't in nappies, they could come along. Subject to the wallet test as well, which
sorry, I was just being very pessimistic.
A little bit cynical there. Okay, talking cynical, I think that leads us on nicely to the next article that we have, and this is about the new political force in the UK and their perspective on education, which troubles me a little, but apparently I'm more aligned than I realized. A little bit of a shout out. The article is in Schools Week, which is managed and run by Educationscape, who I've had done a lot of work with, most recently at the Festival of Education in Bangkok, which was an amazing event. Really enjoyed speaking there, so thank you. And I would recommend Schools Week as a great place to learn about what's going on in the world of education. And here we go. Reform, the new political force in the UK, is starting to talk about SEND reform, and it was a little bit of a headline grabber, wasn't it? Article.
Yeah.
What talk to us a little bit, Kaylee.
So I read the headline and I was like, could be interesting, could be controversial. And then as I was reading down, Chris, I couldn't help but notice there are some parallels and some things we've mentioned over the last few months. Some of the things are this idea that there's a crisis over diagnosis, that we are just labeling people when really we should be giving, teachers should just be giving extra time or extra support and saying that, which I thought was interesting, because we have been, between the two of us, quite staunchly supportive of this idea that teachers know, what's best, and it doesn't matter so much about the label. It says here, what we need is much more schools-based, teachers-based, trusted approach, which I feel is something that you are very much behind. And so as I was reading down, I was like, this is interesting. I never thought that we could find ourselves here. And then kind of it goes off the boil a little bit, but yeah, Chris, I'd love your thoughts, having read this article, and
yeah, this interests me a little, because I've watched at my son's school particularly, I've seen kids wandering around with ear defenders on, and so I've seen this thing actually play out in real time. I've also watched kids have absolute meltdowns when the environment is just too much for them, too much noise, too much stimulation, what have you, and they just can't cope. So I'm aware that that's a reality for some children. As I read this, I think in principle the idea of teacher-based judgment is fine, and stripping out those kind of things like a formal diagnosis for everything. For me, I think my perspective is a little bit different, insofar as I kind of see that a lot of these things that exist, the challenges that the children face, whether it's dyslexia, dyspraxia, sensory overload, whatever it happens to be, is something that in our current system we don't really have time to properly understand. So we box it off in the diagnosis, and we put kids in particular areas so we can kind of generalize how we respond to it. My view here is that reform really are trying to sort of grab the headlines and perhaps have a little bit of a nod to a certain political readership, let's say, around the idea of ear defenders and managing kids where they are. I'm not necessarily sure that reform are that committed to pedagogy reading through this. My sense is that they're more committed to maybe some headlines. And for me, I don't have a problem with kids wearing ear defenders. I don't have a problem with kids. I don't really mind how kids make their progress. And I think really that's probably the differentiation that I would draw here, is that I think teachers should have the time, space, training and support to make it work for those children in their classes, in that ideal world that doesn't exist, and find a way forward with that. For me, the only real solution to that is smaller classes, and that's a resource choice both at government level and at head teacher level, I suppose. But I'm not sure that Richard Tice has enough of a pedagogical background to say that wearing ear defenders is insane, because he's never had to actually teach a class, I suspect, or at least spend a year trying to get a kid through a particular curricula and so on. But I'd invite him to do that, invite him to volunteer for a year in a school with maybe high rates of SEND, and see how he goes, and see what his opinion is afterwards, if he survives.
Yeah, and so I think some of the things at the bottom of this article, where we're talking about, the National Autistic Society have responded to specifically his Ear Defender's insane comment. Say everything that I would want to say. I think they spreading these kind of headlines, they call it lies, stigmatizes autistic people, makes life harder for them, and I completely agree. I completely agree with that. So I think they've responded kind of to the clickbait headline. I think it's interesting. In the middle of the article, he talks about money, effectively, that doing a report, doing an EHCP every year is an incredibly expensive and costly process, and that we could just do them less often. That, I think, down that road again, a bit like we spoke about last time, down that road, I do agree there's a lot of paperwork. There's probably too much paperwork. There's paperwork which is getting in the way of doing other things because there's only a finite amount of time. And the reason why kids have this is so that they have a right to the support that they have. And if we start saying, oh, well, they only need to have one of those every 3 years, then we start slowly shutting down those rights. And
I also think within that there's a real danger that we say, well, the system for doing these things doesn't work, so we're going to stop doing these things, rather than saying, well, the system doesn't work for doing these things, but these things have value. So maybe we should find another way of doing it that's a little more effective, a little more efficient. And I think that's probably the route that we should be looking at. It does trouble me greatly, the fact that we have a political party that looks like it may well have some influence, and it's talking about kind of people with SEND just kind of having to get on with it and live with the system for those without. That terrifies me, because that's the start of a very dark road.
Yep.
And moving on from that, I think we've probably established that I probably still won't be voting for reform, despite the parallels that you raised. We'll let's have a quick look, because there was a nice thing that popped up that you mentioned about love reading for kids, and I think this sort of moves us on to something altogether more positive and brighter.
It does, and it's something that I just thought I'd mention. I attended a webinar by the Literacy Association the other day. The English Association, all about love reading for kids. And at this time of year, when we're probably thinking about, I'm thinking about gifting for Christmas, because I like to get ahead of the game, and because we live abroad, and so we have to think about these things earlier, because posts and nightmare. Love reading for kids, love reading for schools is a really cool platform if you are in the UK or if you're abroad. Let me tell you why. So the whole idea with buying books from Love Reading is that you can choose to donate 25% of the face value of the book that you are buying to a school of your choice. The school has to sign up. All of the schools in the UK have the ability to sign up for free and effectively get free money, which is incredible. Everybody should be doing it. Everybody who is buying a book for Christmas new this year, not saying that everybody has to buy new books, very happy with charity shop books, but if you're thinking about buying a new book, it would be so much better to do it through Love Reading than Amazon or even a local bookseller, because you can donate money to a school to go for their reading needs.
I like that.
If you're abroad and you don't have nephews, nieces, family members, friends who have a UK school that you're trying to send it to, you can also just click the button that says give 10% to the pot, and that pot is collated for schools in need, and they can reach out to Love Reading and say, we don't have any budget for books, can you help us? And then there's money in the pot for them, and I think that's incredible.
Can you imagine a
Um,
school facing that kind of budgetary consideration? We have no money for books.
we have no money for books. I mean, and that is a very real budgetary consideration, that people are facing, that schools are facing. They're, facing concerns over heating versus, books. It's really tough. It's a tough landscape out there. And so this is a bit of a kind of I don't know, social thing, which I really like.
Yeah, we are a G4 country, aren't we? Yeah, we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Just for the record. On that note, with regards to books, I'm a big fan of books for Christmas. We do the Norwegian thing where we get books on like Christmas Eve. We've got a bit of a fusion Christmas goes on in our house. That we do the Norwegian thing with the books. We also have the Feast of the Seven Fishes on on Christmas Eve, which comes from Italy. And then we do like an Anglo-Saxon British Christmas on Christmas Day.
Love it.
And we do the Bufana as well, but I can't remember when she arrives.
Bufana's the 6th, right? Because it would be the Kings. It would be Epiphany.
Yeah.
Right?
You're speaking to the wrong person to pin down. I didn't go to Sunday school, so I'm probably not the right person to ask. But here's the question: if you've got a son or a daughter that does find reading traumatic,
yes,
and finds it a challenge,
yes,
what would your take be in terms of buying them books? Because it's like sort of buying in trauma and then flagging it up for them.
Yeah, have a great big box of trauma. No, that would not be my suggestion. My suggestion wouldn't be to buy them books. My suggestion would be to buy you, the plural, yous if you were in the north, books, and to make that a beautiful, lovely thing. A lovely picture book to share, a lovely hot chocolate and lovely hot chocolate and reading where you do the reading. You as the parent are the reader, or an older sibling is the reader. I don't think just gifting a book is going to make anybody love reading, but a warm, cozy moment with the Christmas tree and the telly turned off and everybody sitting around and enjoying, I don't know, the Polar Express is one that comes to mind, simply because it's also a little bit dark, a little bit creepy in places. And so that does, it kind of reaches old and young.
A bit of story time. Yeah,
a little story time. Because that sense of comfort and security and, like, to use, I don't know, the Scandinavian word that I will mispronounce, like hygge, the hyggeliness of that moment is going to build so much more than just giving a book and giving trauma. It's giving trauma. We don't want that.
I've taken to subscribing to Audible. Other book platforms are available. But when I fly, and I've rediscovered the joy of having a story read to me. Wow. I sleep a lot better on flights now than I did before.
An avid Audible listener, have been for years and years and years. Audiobooks are lovely. And there's nothing quite like having somebody else read to you who's in there in that moment with the blanket, with the hot chocolate, with that cozy moment. If reading is something that is becoming traumatic, what a lovely way to self-regulate that together. Just one more shout out to Love Reading. They do have a lovely collection of, it's not just a book buying platform. They have a lovely collection of wish lists, and in their kind of highlights, they go through books for reluctant readers, audiobooks, books with author interviews, books of the month, weekly staff picks. So if you are struggling, or if you are a teacher abroad and you don't know what's come out in the last 6 months, because often we end up a little bit kind of detached from reality, you can use this platform to find things.
Excellent. Well, nice. That sounds like a really positive thing. We've got one final thing to get into. We're conscious of time, as always. I could sit and talk to you for hours, Kaylee, I'll be honest with you, but I don't have hours. So no. Go all in. Tell me a little bit about this for National Year of Reading 2026.
So I feel like it was our very first podcast that we did together, where we talked about kind of crisis of reading and what had come out from all of the every piece of research that was saying, you know, reading for pleasure is in crisis. It's in crisis from ages 8 to 16. And I think we spoke at length about that and have continued to come back to that again and again. So the government in with you know, basically everybody else who's interested, the National Literacy Trust and other people have kind of decided that next year will be a national year of reading, which I think, I really hope is going to make a difference. I'm really not sure that just having a year and calling it the year of reading, unless there's actionable things, is going to make a difference. But I love the fact that they're trying to do something to highlight how important this is, to raise awareness of the National Year of Reading. So at the moment, it's called Go All In, and it's to see, how reading in all of its forms, and they do stress that, can unlock more of what you love, whether it's, you know, music or baking or family, trying to get everybody involved and aware of reading for pleasure, for the love of it. And so this is what's happening from January. They did announce just yesterday, or maybe it was this morning, that Authorify is going to be a partner with this, and that is a lovely website where you can get author interviews and free resources for teachers. And so we'll probably come back to this in January when that's launched, because you can't really get on the platform until it starts, because you have to pay. It's behind a paywall, but next year it will be for free. And so we can have a look at that. But I'm excited for a year of reading.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth noting we have one of Amazon's best-selling authors working with Koru. My friend and colleague Shane Leaning made the bestseller list recently. I'm not in the least bit jealous. Change starts here. Definitely worth a read. I've got a signed copy from him, of course. So yeah, we're lucky to have people like that, and I think this is a great idea. I do, whether it's really effective or not. I think that it's great that there are people out there and organizations that are prepared to put themselves forward and try to make things work.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that's so much better than not trying and just kind of giving up. So I'm a big fan of this, and I like the idea of broadening out that notion of reading and sort of accessing stories and knowledge and things like that. And I think that perhaps we do get a little bit caught up on the sort of traditional side of it, because it's what we've done I'm part of the older generation. You're not quite there yet. You know, that we get sort of bogged down in that traditional avenue of reading, and actually it's a little bit broader than that. So, but that's a good news story. Looking forward to 2026 on that score. And Kaylee Leisure, it's a pleasure as always to talk to you. I could talk to you all day, but I don't have it. So I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it at that.
We'll wrap it up there. This has been fun.
Great work today. Thank you for that. Really nice ideas. And if you kids out there, if you're wearing ear defenders, it's fine. Just
please continue to wear them. Also adults.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, have you ever been into
my teaching career a whole lot more comfortable?
No, but I mean, I'm still thinking specifically for me, like when I go into a school lunchroom.
Oh yeah.
And the noise, the acoustics are awful. Generally, not all schools, but generally they're awful. And the noise physically puts me off eating. I find it really hard. So if I could wear a set of earplugs or some ear defenders in the school canteen, I would, and it wouldn't be insane. None of it's insane. The only insaneness.
If it works for you, it's not insane.
Exactly. I'm fully supportive.
All right, and Kaylee Leisure, thanks again.
Okay. Bye.
Bye now.